Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the absolute most chilling maritime mysteries in all of human history, the Mary Celeste. Now, to really grasp the sheer terror of this story, you kind of have to put yourself in the mindset of the golden age of sailing. Back in 1872, the ocean was, well, it was basically an absolute black box. Once a ship left port, boom, it was completely severed from the rest of humanity. No radios, no GPS, zero satellite tracking, just you, a wooden hull, and thousands of miles of deep, unforgiving water. So, if you love a good detective story or, a puzzle with pieces that just absolutely refuse to fit together, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to step right into the isolation of the 19th century Atlantic, unpack the exact evidence step by step, and try to figure out why this unsolved cold case literally still terrifies seasoned sailors today. Okay, let's dive into this.
Now, you've probably heard the term ghost ship tossed around in movies or folklore, right? Usually that brings to mind some rotting, wrecked hull covered in seaweed creeping through the fog. But the Mary Celeste earned a much more unnerving, very specific classification in maritime lore: the zombie ship. And a zombie ship isn't your typical sunken wreck. No, it's a vessel found drifting on the open ocean, perfectly, unnervingly intact. It's fully loaded with its heavy cargo, completely stocked with months' worth of fresh food and drinkable water. But there is absolutely no one on board. The entire crew has just vanished into thin air, leaving the vessel to sail on its own like a mindless, wandering zombie. It's just an incredibly eerie concept when you think about it. A massive, functioning machine totally devoid of its human operators. So to figure out how a fully equipped vessel becomes a zombie ship, we really need to go back to the beginning.
Section 1. The Zombie Ship Discovery. A chilling encounter in December 1872.
Let's move to and see how this builds, setting our scene out in the vast, freezing, lonely stretches of the Atlantic Ocean. This is where a totally routine voyage turned into a historic enigma. Just days prior to the discovery, the captain of the Mary Celeste made a completely standard entry in his logbook. It was boringly normal. He noted the weather, the coordinates, the day's routine. No frantic distress calls scribbled in the margins, no notes about sudden storms, literally nothing whatsoever to indicate trouble on the horizon. Then, in early December 1872, a British ship sailing its own lonely route spots the Mary Celeste. But right away, the British crew can tell something is deeply, deeply wrong. The ship is just drifting aimlessly, its sails are set all awkwardly, and it's moving erratically. Now, the crew of this British ship actually knew the captain of the Mary Celeste by reputation. He was a highly experienced, deeply respected sailor. So seeing his ship drifting like a toy in a bathtub, that instantly signaled a profound disaster. The British crew decides to row a small boat over and board the vessel to offer help. As they climb over those wooden rails, listening to the eerie silence and the creaking of the hull, they're bracing themselves. They fully expected to find a horrific tragedy. A violent mutiny, a deadly outbreak of yellow fever, maybe a bloody pirate attack. But what they actually found was far, far stranger than any of those nightmares.
Section 2. Examining the baffling clues, the crime scene inventory. To really grasp the mystery here, we have to look at the physical evidence left behind. We're going to step into the shoes of those British sailors and conduct our own little inventory of the scene. Imagine walking down into the damp, wooden belly of this ship. You're expecting overturned tables, ransacked quarters, maybe the foul smell of sickness. But instead, you walk into the galley and find absolute normality. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how mundane everything is. The ship's food and water, fully stocked. There's literally months' worth of provisions sitting right there, unspoiled and ready to eat. You head down into the hold to check the cargo, completely untouched. You walk into the crew's living quarters, their personal belongings, their cold weather clothing, tobacco pipes, money, it's all left exactly where it belonged, neatly tucked away in their trunks. And that captain's logbook we mentioned earlier, sitting peacefully on his desk, showing absolutely zero signs of panic or impending danger. No blood on the floorboards, no signs of a physical struggle, no shattered masts from a rogue wave. The pumps were working fine, the hull was perfectly sound. It was a completely pristine environment, just entirely devoid of human life.
And I want to highlight one highly specific piece of that inventory. 1,071. That massive number represents the exact barrels of industrial alcohol sitting tightly packed in the cargo hold of the Mary Celeste. 1,071 barrels. And every single one of them, which by the way represented a massive fortune in 19th century currency, was left completely 100% untouched.
Now look, pirates have a pretty predictable business model. If they had boarded the Mary Celeste, the absolute first thing to go would be that highly valuable cargo. They would have ruthlessly raided the ship, stripping the crew of their warm clothing, their coins, their personal effects, before abandoning or sinking the vessel. But the evidence here paints a completely different picture, and this brilliantly illustrates why it absolutely was not a robbery. Every single personal valuable and all 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol were left perfectly in place. Not a single coin was taken. Whoever or whatever caused this crew to vanish had absolutely no interest in wealth.
Let's just pause for a second to truly absorb the absurdity of this scene. You've got months' worth of fresh food and water, survival absolute essentials in the middle of the ocean. You have a massive fortune in untouched cargo sitting safely below deck. You have the crew's hard-earned valuables resting securely in their quarters, and a logbook indicating it was just another totally uneventful day at sea. You basically have a ship that is, for all intents and purposes, the absolute safest place to be for 1,000 miles in any direction. A floating fortress of survival. Everything is exactly as it should be, except for one mind-bending detail.
The only thing missing from the entire ship was one single lifeboat. Think about the terrifying implications of that for a second. The open Atlantic is hostile, it's freezing, it is deeply unforgiving. Ocean swells can literally reach the height of buildings. Here you have a crew sailing a massive, fully functional, well-stocked ship. And suddenly, collectively, they decide to lower a tiny, flimsy wooden rowboat into those crushing waves, climb inside, and row away, leaving absolutely everything they need to survive behind them.
Section 3. The ultimate unsolved mystery, the final deduction.
Okay, we've laid out the clues, we know what was miraculously preserved on the ship, and we know the one tiny piece of equipment that went missing. Now we have to try to apply logic to a completely illogical situation and really dive into the psychology of a 19th century sailor. A sailor knows better than anyone that the deep ocean is a literal death sentence in a tiny boat. Human nature, especially the deeply ingrained survival instincts of an experienced sea captain and his crew, dictates that you never ever abandon a floating ship. You fight to keep your ship afloat until the deck is literally sinking beneath your feet because that ship is your only hope. So, the crucial point is, what does it mean when 10 people abandon a perfectly safe haven to make a desperate escape into a vulnerable little lifeboat? The only possible logical deduction is sheer, unadulterated panic. The captain and crew must have believed that staying on board the Mary Celeste meant certain instantaneous death. The ship looked perfectly safe to the British crew who found it, sure, but to the people abandoning it, it must have suddenly appeared as a deadly, inescapable trap.
But what was that deadly trap? Honestly, we will likely never know. And that brings us to the grim facts that make this a true, enduring cold case. No bodies were ever found. Out of the entire crew that boarded that tiny lifeboat, no one ever turned up alive at any port, anywhere in the world. Despite decades of massive, global investigations by maritime courts, insurance agents, newspaper reporters, not a single trace of them was ever discovered. Whatever terrifying illusion, whatever bizarre physical phenomenon, or whatever spark of sheer psychological panic drove them off their perfectly safe ship, it vanished into the dark waters right alongside them.
So what on earth could terrify a hardened crew so deeply that they chose to abandon a perfectly good ship and jump into the freezing Atlantic Ocean forever? It's a mystery that the sea has held on to for over a century and a half, and one it stubbornly refuses to give up. Thank you so much for joining me as we unraveled the clues of the Mary Celeste. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.